In today's sew along, I'm going to be making the Phoebe Shirred top, but I'm going to be using it as an add-on for the Phoebe freebie. So I'm going to take the Phoebe freebie pants with the pocket add-on, and I'm going to attach the shirred top to that. Now the shirred top can be made in its own right, as can the pants. The whole point of the Phoebe collection is that you can mix and match and be your own designer. So here you can see I've got my pattern pieces laid out. The fabric that I'm using is quite narrow. It's a beautiful silk crepe de chine, and it's only about 120 centimeters wide, so it's not the most economical layout. If you have a wider fabric, then you'll probably find that you can use a whole lot less. So this fabric, I've got the pattern pieces running along the grain line, as you can see. So now I'm going to cut out the front section. So I've got the front trouser, the ties. I need to cut 2 pairs of the ties, the pocket and the top of the front. And once I've cut those out, I will then cut out the back trouser and the back top. I've cut out my pattern pieces and I'm ready to prepare the top. I'm going to do this video in 2 parts. I'll do the shirred top first, and then I'll do a second video showing how to do the pocket add-on onto the Phoebe freebie trousers. So to prepare the top part for the shirring, I'm going to draw my shirring lines onto the pattern piece. You'll find in your pattern a template for the lines, which are 2.5 centimeters apart, but feel free to change that. You can make them 2 centimeters, 1 centimeter, whatever works for you. But in preparing these pieces, I need to draw the lines on with something that's going to disappear. So I really like these friction pens, but you do need to be careful with them because sometimes the marks don't disappear. So here I have a piece of scrap where I've drawn on in the purple and in the pink. I like the felt tip because it's easy to draw that on the fabric, whereas the ballpoint tends to drag the fabric. On this side, I've ironed the marks away to see which works better, and the pink was here, and it does leave a faint shadow but not as much as the purple. So I'm going to use the pink pen to draw my lines on. As I said, the marks are 2.5 centimeters apart, and this is a rectangular shape, and you want that to be a very true rectangle. So I did something which might be considered a bit naughty, and I actually tore the fabric along both edges to ensure that I have a perfectly square line. Now to draw these shirring lines, I'm going to use this ruler, which actually measures 2.5 centimeters wide. So I can just place that onto the fabric. I'm going to line up with the bottom edge first, and I'm just going to carefully trace those lines onto the fabric. I'm not going to press too hard. I just want to have a line that's strong enough for me to see it, but knowing that it does leave a slight shadow, I don't want it to be too thick and heavy. So I'm just drawing my line, moving the ruler up, and I'm going to carry on tracing that. So I'm going to do that to both the front and the back sections of my Phoebe Shirred top. Now you want to do this on the right side of the fabric because we're going to be sewing on the right side of the fabric when we do the shirring. If you find that the marks are left, you can also get chalk tracing paper which you could place over your material, and then you could just use a tracing wheel to transfer the lines of the shirring onto the fabric, but I certainly find this much easier, and I like it when these pens work. As you can see, there's no drag lines, or the fabric's not dragging as I draw because it's the felt tip pen. So I'll carry on doing this to this piece, and then I'll do exactly the same to the other side. Okay, so here are my 2 front pieces. I have drawn all my shirring lines onto the fabric, and now I'm going to sew the material. So right sides together, the lines are drawn on the right side, and I'm going to just sew down the two short sides. So back tacking, holding the edges close together and sewing all the way down. Back tucking again. I like to do a technique that's called chaining on, and that's where instead of taking the material out, you just carry on sewing. So back down this edge, you can snip that to release it, hold the other edge firmly and sew down. Like so. Okay, now I'm going to overlock that. When I overlock, I also do the chaining on technique. So I'm just going to cut the overlocking now and trim off my threads. And the first thing I'm going to do is sew the top edge. Now, if I hadn't drawn my lines on in a fabric that disappears with heat, I would actually press those seam allowances and I would press them towards the back. But because I have these drawn on lines, I won't be doing that. So I'm going to turn it through to the right side, and I'm going to do a double 1 centimetre or 1/4 inch hem around the top. So I'm going to turn the material 1 centimetre and then 1 centimetre again, and I'm going to just sew all around. Okay, now I'm coming up to the point where I started. I'm going to leave a little gap because I'm going to actually end up threading elastic through this top edge to keep it secure. So this top could be worn without the straps if you wanted to, like a boob tube. So there we have about a 1 centimetre, 1/4 inch gap. Now, if I was going to make this into a top, I would then do exactly the same to the bottom edge, and then I would carry on with my shirring. But because I'm adding this onto the Phoebe Freebie pants, I'm going to leave that edge and go straight onto my shirring. So I need to prepare for the shirring. I'm going to take my bobbin out, which has a normal thread on it, and I need to put shirring thread onto an empty bobbin. So this is shirring thread. It comes on a roll. I'm just going to pop it on the spool here. To prepare it, just your bobbin might have a little hole, so you can thread the elastic through that hole. Like so. And then you can just gently hold that, and then you want to have a relaxed tension on your elastic, and you're just going to sort of gently wind that on, slightly pulling it but not too much, because the tighter you pull that, then the tighter your shirring will be, and we don't want it to be too tight. Now that I have a bit on the bobbin, I'm just going to snip that thread so it's not getting in the way and carry on winding it. So in today's example, I'm doing the long-waisted top onto the pants. You could do the short-waisted top onto the high-waisted pants. So you probably would need about 1.5 to 2 bobbins of elastic on your spools. We'll see how we go. I'm just going to start with this, and then I may need to do another whole one, or I might just need a half one. So winding that on. Don't overfill it because it won't fit into your bobbin case. So that's wound, so I'm just going to cut that off and put the elastic away. Now I'm going to thread it into my bobbin case just as you would normally do. With some bobbins you do need to change the tension on your bobbin. You have a little screw And you can loosen that a bit if you think that the elastic is too tight when you're sewing. On my domestic sewing machines, I actually have a separate bobbin case especially for shirring because it affects it, whereas on my industrial sewing machine it's fine. So I'm just going to pop that back into the machine, click it into place, turn the wheel to bring the elastic up. So now I'm going to start doing my shirring. So like I said before, we need to sew this on the right side of the fabric. So I've drawn my lines on, and in the nature of fabric being a bit wobbly, it has actually shifted slightly. So I just need to true up those lines as I'm sewing. So I'm going to put the foot down, a couple of stitches of back tacking. Now the trick with sewing shirring elastic is that you want to hold the fabric in front of you firmly, but you let it gather up behind. So I'll just demonstrate that. So I'm going to sew, and see how I have my finger resting behind the foot. When I move my finger away, you can see that it's gathering. So the fabric that you use for shirring is going to make a big difference. This is a very soft, light fabric. It's going to gather a lot more. If I used a thicker fabric, it wouldn't gather so much. You also will find that the more rows you have, the tighter your gathering will get. So given that I'm doing the longer top, I probably wouldn't want my shirring too close together, because then it would just end up being a scrunched little thing. Okay, so now I've reached the point where I started. I'm going to over sew, a little back tack, lift the foot, my needle is up, my hook is up, and I'm just going to lift the foot and drag it over to the next line and put the foot down. I can cut my threads after. I find that this is a more efficient way of doing it. A little back tack, again holding it firmly in front. And sewing around. So we're going to carry on with this for all the rows that we've got. Okay, I'm about halfway down, and you can see it's getting hard to get into that circle. So I'm just going to lift the foot up, and now I'm going to start from the other end. Just trim that thread, trim the elastic. So this is how the shirring is looking from the wrong side, and you can see just how much it's shrunk, but it will stretch right out again. So while I'm at it, I'm just going to check my bobbin, because I feel like it could be pretty near the end of the elastic. So I'm just going to wind another spool. That probably wouldn't have even made another whole round. Okay, so now I'm going to start from the other end. Find that side seam. I like to start on the side seams because it's a sort of discrete area to start sewing. I'm not really fussed about the direction that my seam allowance is going, even though it is quite even, because I didn't press it. Back tack, and off I go again. finished all the rows. So now I can just go along that side seam and trim off the stray threads if I need to. Sometimes I actually don't need to, but I can see that it's sort of pulling there, so I'm just going to snip the elastic. I'm not going to cut it too closely back, just in case it was tempted to slip out, and it's fine just to snip along there. The texture of the shirring really feels amazing in your hands. I just love it. Okay, so there's my shirred top. I'm now ready to thread elastic through the top, and if I was doing this as a top only, I probably wouldn't have done that last row of shirring, and I just would have done the double turn and turned that up. So I'll just get the elastic. Okay, so I've measured off a piece of elastic. I've wrapped that around my chest area, so above my bust, and I don't like it too tight, so I've just sort of made it fairly relaxed. Now I'm going to use this nice little bobbin threading tool. Never actually quite sure of the name, but you slide the ring up and then you thread the elastic in between the pincers and slide the ring down, and it's the best tool for threading elastic through. So we're going to find our opening, which was near the side seam, and I'm going to thread that through. So my elastic measures about 7 mil, which is I don't know what that is, an imperial 3/16 of an inch. So then I'm going to thread the elastic through. So when I'm doing it, I'm just sliding the elastic along and coming out this end. Now what you'll find is that your elastic will be substantially wider through this channel than the shirring, and that's fine because we don't actually want it to be too tight around the top, whereas the shirring stretches a lot. We wouldn't want to make this elastic to the same width, so just bear that in mind. It might look strange, but it will be more comfortable. So sliding that through the channel. And I'm about to come out the other end. There it is. Sliding, I'm just going to slide that back around. Like so. Pull that out. Slide the ring up, and that's done. Now I just need to close the elastic into a loop. So I'm just going to wrap one end on top of the other. I'm going to set my machine to a zigzag stitch. And I'm just going to zigzag up and down a few times just to close that. Don't worry if it looks messy, it's going to be concealed. Okay, and then you just slide the elastic along to shuffle it into its little hole, and then you just want to close that little hole. So we're just going to do a little straight stitch to make that closed. And trim those threads and just shuffle that elastic around again so that it's nice and evenly dispersed around the top. So you can see it kind of looks a bit fluted, but that we need that. Okay, so now I am ready to sew my straps. Okay, so I'm not going to press the top yet because I'm going to join it onto the bottom. In order to join the straps on, I will just lightly press just the very top. So here I have two pairs of my straps. So what we're going to do is fold the straps in half, right sides together, having changed your bobbin thread back to a normal thread. So we're going to do just a 1 centimetre seam allowance or a 1/4 inch, sewing along the strap. Coming up to the end, needle down to pivot, turn and sew to the end. Now again, I'm going to chain on because I find that this is a much more efficient way of sewing when I'm doing something repetitive like this. Okay, now I'm at the end, lift the foot, trim my threads and snip the straps to separate them. Now I'm going to turn the straps through, so I'm going to fold along the stitching edge on both sides, and then I'm just going to push that back on itself. This is a bit sticky, this fabric, so just lifting it. So pushing it back on itself, pushing my thumb in. Now you could use a pair of scissors and push that through, but that risks making a hole. What I like to do is use a big fat knitting needle, and I've actually taken the end off the knitting needle, so rather than using the pointy end I use the blunt end, and I just push that back on itself like so, and then I can use the pointy end if I want to just push those corners out. So I'm pushing that back in there and just gently pushing that through. And that's a more gentle way of getting a nice sharp corner than, say, pushing it through with scissors. So I'm just going to do that to all 4 straps and give that a press. Okay, so I've pressed my straps and they look like beautiful ribbons, and now I'm going to sew them onto the top. So what I'm going to do is I've marked my positions of where they're all going to go, and because of the elastic is in there I just need to stretch that out a bit. So I'm going to place the raw edge of the ribbon, and if you find that it's a bit uneven, just give that a trim to clean it up, and I'm going to place that onto the top. And it is a bit fiddly to do, so really the easiest thing is to just put the foot of the sewing machine down, and that will hold it in place. Take the needle out, give that a little pull, and I'm just going to sew with the strap facing in the wrong direction across there, back tacking at each ends. Pull that out and trim the threads. And then I'm going to fold the strap forward so it's in the correct direction, and that's going to conceal the seam nicely. And I'm just going to put the foot down again and sew along the top and back tacking at each end. So what that's going to do is conceal the raw edge of the strap, and it gives me a nice neat edge. So trim those threads. And I'm going to go round and do the same thing to the other 3. So there we go, the top is done. If I'd hemmed that in the beginning, this would be ready to be worn, but I'm going to be sewing this onto the Phoebe Freebie pants with the pockets. I'll be making those next, and these will get joined together right at the very end.